An unleashed leader for me is somebody who kindly pushes the bounds of what's possible for someone, helps them see beyond what they think are the limits for themselves, and inspires them to reach for that and achieve it.
Welcome to the Unleashing Leaders podcast, where we work with willing leaders to accelerate the changes you seek. We'll learn from the experiences of different leaders facing real challenges and distill practical, purposeful steps to apply in your context. I'm Lee Scott, your curious co-pilot. Together, let's make positive changes for our companies and communities. Welcome back to the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Today, we are joined by our guest, Debra Squyres. She is the Chief Customer Officer at Bonusly. She operates out of the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area here in the United States. Today, Debra and I are going to be looking at kind of two dimensions. One, how do you elevate the customer experience, but in particular, how do you do it by elevating the team member experience? Because that is truly the gateway to the impact your business is seeking. Debra, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Lee. I'm super excited for this conversation.
Your curious co-pilot.
Excellent. Well, you've got kind of a cool job title now as, Chief Customer Officer. But roll back the clock a little bit for us, Debra. Tell us a little bit about some of your formative years as a leader. When did you first starting to realize that leadership was a thing and maybe you had a knack for it?
So we can roll back the clock a long way if you want to think about the origins of it. I grew up in a family of public servants. My dad was a firefighter. My mom was she was a volunteer in the schools where I was growing up. And so I always saw people stepping up and having an impact in the world. And that, I think, shed into my desire to do something similar, but in my own way. Obviously, I'm not fighting fires, literally. Sometimes I do.
I mean, metaphorically, it probably feels that way sometimes.
Sometimes I do. And so I was taught early on that I had a responsibility for making the world a better place, and was pushed to do so from before I even entered the workforce. In school, even as early as elementary and junior high, being pushed by my parents to use all of the gifts that I have and have positive impact, and to make things better than,
That servant leadership notion was kind of baked in pretty early on for you. And yes, hey, make the place better than when you found it, right? Whatever that happens to be. Yeah, gotcha. And then what was some early career moves and your journey to get to where you are now with Bonusly? I mean, that probably didn't exist when you and I started our careers, but it's certainly been an emerging trend. So how did you find your way to here?
Yeah, so it's very interesting because I actually started my career in in-house HR departments in very large enterprise companies in the early 90s. 1991, 92 is when I started my career.
A good time to start a career, I might add.
For sure. We might have something in common. I wasn't really looking for an HR role. I was looking for a full-time job because I was working my way through college. And I really realized early on that you could have tremendous impact on people's experience of work by working in human resources. And so that's where that passion started. So the first decade of my career was in the seat and in-house HR departments, learning the different disciplines: employee relations, talent acquisition, employee engagement, development. And it was a really solid foundation, but I really struggled in large companies. And I didn't realize that it was a struggle until I left large companies and recognized that there were other ways of doing things. When you don't have any other context or perspective, you don't know what it could be.
Debra, let me pause you right there, because I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that, because it's like, I think some people sometimes call it the boiled frog syndrome, right? Where it's like, something's going on. You have like a sneaking suspicion that, things could be better, or maybe they don't have to be done the way they're being done, but you don't know any better. So you don't have like that frame of reference. And there can start to be this self-doubt that shows, like, am I weird? Am I not getting it? And it's like, actually, and maybe that's so, maybe you aren't, right? But I think it's also equally possible that maybe you're onto something, and maybe that's a belief you should nurture versus suppress. I don't know. Did you kind of go through that part where you were doubting yourself in those moments too? Like, oh, why am I not getting with this?
Yeah, I think I think what I really struggled with is like, is this all that the working world has to offer? Like, is it always going to be like this?
Yeah. Is this as good as it gets? Right. Yeah. Should I just settle and, stop, rattling cages and rocking the boat? Just go along. Right.
Exactly, exactly. And I did notice that I was a bit of a risk taker and vocal. And at the time that I came into the workplace in the early 90s, and the workplaces that I came into. So I started my career in a very large publicly traded financial services company, not the most progressive of companies. Um, and so, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I spoke up a lot because I didn't know any different. I was taught to question things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get the impression, Deborah, you weren't doing it in a way that was rude and condescending and arrogant. You was genuinely, seeking to understand. And of course, immediately it was latched on as like, wow, thank you, Deborah, for being an engaged, caring employee, right? You were elevated into high levels of power. Right. I mean, tell us about, and then, so how soon did you get the company car? That's what I want to know. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. They were like, we need to give her more work because she has too much time to.
Yeah. She's thinking, marry her. Right.
Exactly. Well, again, because I didn't know any better, I'm like, okay, this is a gift. I've got a new project that I'm working on. And really, just sought the opportunity to learn from everything that I faced. I was fortunate to have good mentors early on who helped provide that context. They could see around the corner. They could step back and see, like, maybe this isn't the best environment for you and how you operate and thrive. It's not that that's a bad environment. It's just that, if there's a mismatch between how you naturally operate and the pace at which you like to operate and where you're at, it can cause friction.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I fully believe that there's a place for everybody. Right. And so, to the degree to which you're working against your stripes, and against the grain, you're just exhausting yourself and aggravating those around you. So great. So you started to discover there was like this belief that it could be better. So maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing now with Bonus. You guys certainly have maybe a different perspective than what a very large publicly traded financial services company might have. And again, what you do is probably relevant to a lot of companies. So tell us a little bit about Bonusly and what you guys stand for and are doing in the workplace.
Yeah. Bonusly is a recognition platform that intentionally nurtures three critical relationships in the workplace: the company and employee relationship, employees with each other, and managers and their teams. And we do this through recognition done right. And what that means is we bring to surface and visibility people showing up at their best, how they're living the values, how they're performing. We unlock and mobilize employees in building a high-performing, thriving culture. And we give leaders and HR practitioners the tools to effectively engage with their teams. And so what we really do, our mission is to make work better, but what we really do is make it possible for all three of those relationships not only to be nurtured, but to thrive. And we help people recognize the connection between their behaviors and impact on the business. And so in a world where, Gallup releases reports all the time, where 31% of employees are actively disengaged and a whopping 69% of managers are disengaged, there is a lot of opportunity to create that connection and that sense of not only belonging and togetherness for teams, but also alignment with the company mission and what the company is up to, and feeling a larger sense of purpose around what you're doing.
Deborah, I mean, as wonderful as that all seems, imagine if your very first job had started in this environment. Right. Just as much as your actual experience at the time might have felt weird and was challenging and adverse and had its setbacks, in many respects, that allowed you to be able to see more clearly the opportunities that could be there and made you more. Because if you're just like, well, why isn't everybody doing this? Isn't it obvious? It's like, no, I get why it's not. So I want to share for all of our listeners out there who are like, you're in difficult situations, you're in difficult roles, that's not the end of your journey. This is where you're gaining that superpower to be able to appreciate whatever it is that you're going to end up using later in your career. I mean, has that been, sounds like that's been true for you at least.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I believe that every experience teaches you something. I have worked with amazing leaders who I wanted to emulate, and I have worked with leaders who I wanted to use as a textbook case of what not to do. They were equally important. It's not just important to know what good looks like. It's important to know where the bounds are for what you should be doing as a leader.
And probably most folks were a blend of those two, right? Where you're like, ooh, I like that part. But in that moment, that was the wrong thing at the wrong time. And I think you said, doing recognition right. It's the right way at the right time, and that's hard. I mean, come on, we're human, right? Like that's really hard to hit that strike zone every single pitch. But you can, by learning from different leaders, figure out like, ooh, okay, now's the time for the curveball. Now's the time for the straight up the center. And you develop that through those various experiences, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And it's not just leaders, it's we're learning from each other, and leaders are learning from their teams. So it's not the hierarchical top down approach that actually builds the strongest teams. It's actually creating that visibility and transparency into what's going on and being intentional about catching people at their best when they're having impact, when they're living the values, and being very explicit in what that looks like, because that is something that people can latch onto and seek to emulate. And the variety of examples give people options and optionality into how they show up in that same way.
Supports that agency, right? They have the freedom to choose. It's not like, well, just do this every time like a robot. And you're like, okay, well, then why do you need my brain, right? But I like how you delineated kind of a triumvirate approach of the company employee, and then the supervisor employee relationships. When you have things in groups of three, like triangles are stronger structures than, a singular or just a bilateral one. So that's a unique perspective. I mean, Gallup mentions so much that it is that supervisor employee relationship that's so key. But to your point, right, leadership isn't just a position, right? The supervisors are not the only leaders in the company. And, there's that peer-to-peer relationship that matters as well. Well, Debra, I wanted to zoom out for a second. I mean, your current function is as the chief customer officer, right? And so, we're talking about team members, we're talking about culture, we're talking about customers. I'd like to spend a moment with you helping us to jointly debunk some myths. Because what I find gets in the way sometimes of folks and, really applying some of these effective practices, which we're going to get to in a minute, is some assumptions that like, well, if you're being all recognition-y and joy, happy with your employees, well, then you're losing your focus on your customers. Or conversely, if hey, we're a customer focused company. And so you just need to sacrifice and give more to the customer. And, that's how you get it done. And it's like somehow there's this trade-off between either the customers are happy or the team members are happy, but somehow this world where it's mutually beneficial, it can't possibly be. And I think that's a false dichotomy. I would use another more colorful language that starts with horse, ends with something that rhymes with it. But it's a false dichotomy. Like, I don't think that's so. So could you elaborate a little bit on some of the myths that get away of the customer focus and maybe redefine it in a more powerful way for us?
Yeah, I think at the core, to enable an exceptional customer experience, you have to enable an exceptional team member experience. You can, in the short term, sacrifice one for the other. I have never been one of the either or people. I am always looking for the and. Early in my career in leadership on these teams, though, I may not have really been able to strike the right balance. You know it theoretically, but it's hard to put it into practice. So we need to...
It's like, I know yoga theoretically, but like, don't ask me to put it into practice.
Exactly. You have to really map out how do you improve the customer experience by making it possible for the people who work with the customers to show up at their best day in and day out. The reality is when I'm having a great day, I can rock it. I can improvise. I can make things up as I go. But when I'm having a bad day, I need it to be really easy for me to show up for the people who are counting on me. And in these roles, it's for your customers. If you look internally in companies, if you don't serve the customer directly, you serve the people who serve the customer.
You're serving a customer, right? Yeah. It's like there's always a customer, whether they're the ones internal, external, or indirect, or even your externals, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so you have to, as a leader in this function, break out, what's going on in the customer experience, but also what's going on in a team member experience. And sometimes you give a little bit more to one or the other because that's going to have the best long-term impact, but you have to incorporate both. And by doing that, then your team members show up in ways that then help you move faster and build momentum around that experience. So they make the right decisions. They surface the things that if we just adjusted this one process, I would be more effective, more efficient, be able to articulate this better for customers or support them in this way.
Well, I like how you're connecting these dots because rather than, like you said, that they're disparate things and, fixed pie, more of one means less of another. Really, when you look at what you want the customer experience to be, that is the source of the behaviors and the moments that you want to recognize your employees for creating, right? And that's the bridge right there. So it's not like, well, just good job, you showed up. Good job, you didn't steal today. Good job. It's like, okay, but really being able to tie it back to, hey, these are the specific moments of interactions with your customer. And it's not only the product that you're giving, but it's how you're providing it. So whether you're a barista or you're a knowledge worker or you're a medical professional, right? Like there's always a blend of you, it's a joint thing, right? Like we talk about doctors like needing a bedside manner. We talk about, the customer that you're checking out with, like the conversation with that checkout clerk, that's part of the interaction, right? Yes, you're getting your widget, but I think if we can look at those moments, like you said, and then extract from those, like, here's what makes it magical for our particular business, then that's the input to the feedback.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So you get that sense of what matters most in your organization, and maybe you encapsulate those in values and goals and customer journey maps and, OKRs, whatever the fancy techniques you use are there. So let's fast forward though, because we've had some other guests that have covered that part of it. So now your superpower is being able to connect those dots. So we know there's some things that add value to the customer experience that we want to celebrate and anchor. We know there's things that add value to the team member experience, that peer-to-peer. What are some ways that, a leader, mid-level leader in an organization can be more intentional and more impactful, and how they connect that recognition and acknowledgement?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. There are a few things. One, in the explicit sharing of recognition that ties to specific goals, to specific outcomes, to the way that team members show up. So explaining what it is that is in that person's special sauce, their unique superpower that has them show up in a way that is impactful, and being very explicit about that. So people know that it's more than just about the outcome, but the effort and the personalization that they brought to that. Doing that publicly, or memorializing it in a recognition program, makes it possible for others to see and emulate that behavior. Importantly, though, doing that along with asking the team the questions about what's getting in the way. If you had, a magic wand, what would you either change or eliminate from process? What would you add to that would be very impactful? The team members know. Sometimes they don't know how to articulate it or where to bring it up. And so as leaders, we have to be able to ask the right questions and then be quiet. You don't problem solve in that moment. It's information gathering, it's discovery, but creating this environment and a strong culture, one that is grounded in recognition, is one where you have built trust because you are catching people at their best and you're doing that frequently. You have to do it on a regular basis. Gallup says at least one time every 7 days, we see within Bonusly and within our customers, it's more than once a week. It's that repetitive catching people at their best, catching people doing exceptional work, that they begin to trust that you have their best interest in mind and at heart. And then that paves the way for you to be able to provide that coaching and constructive feedback that helps them adjust their approach in the moment, where they can have a different outcome or different impact. So it's two sides of the same coin of feedback. One is positive feedback through recognition that builds trust. People feel seen for the things that they show up. Yes, exactly. Because we all want a feedback culture. But if you lead with constructive feedback, you don't have any grounding of trust or people feeling like they're seen as whole humans, whole contributors. Then you limit people's ability to truly personalize and take in that feedback and action it. So it's important that you build that foundation of trust first.
Yeah. Well, and I think, some folks mistake that to say, oh, okay, well, then if I need to provide some positive feedback before I provide constructive feedback, then when I'm having a conversation, I start with positive, I insert the negative, and then I end with a positive. And look, I've covered all my bases. And, people call that the crap sandwich, right?
Yes, I was just going to say, you probably went to the same trainings I did on the crap sandwich.
Man, I was like, look, there's no way people are parsing it that finely. So I think to your point, you were saying like, it's like once a week, baby, minimum, like to water the plants. Like if you don't water the plant once a week, it dies, just period. So if you're saying, okay, once a week's the minimum, so maybe I'm shooting for 2, well, then you're like, okay, over this week, like here's 2 acknowledgments, little micro doses. All right, next week it's another one. Oh, now there's a little bit of constructive feedback, but each one is independent. And versus you trying to like, okay, well, we haven't talked in a year. Let me cover 10 things that I should have covered with you. Like there's no way they're digesting that.
Right. They're not digesting it. It lands on you like a boulder versus small incremental little pebbles that you can collect over time and put into the right place. And why wouldn't you, if you actually care about me, why wouldn't you tell me what I need to do to achieve the desired outcome when I can actually impact the outcome? Why make a list of all the things that I didn't do right and tell me 6 months or a year from now?
8 months from now, I'm going to tell you about all these things.
Yeah, exactly. But you pave the way in building that ongoing feedback loop by combining recognition and constructive feedback, not together in the same message, because that's confusing as hell. And we totally messed up a whole generation of leaders when we trained on the poop sandwich. Yes.
Now to differentiate, that's not to say that when I'm giving you constructive feedback, I come in swinging and like, okay, this is going to be a beatdown, grab your box cleans. I can reaffirm the relationship, right? So I can be like, hey, Debra, you know how much I appreciate you. You've done lots of great things here. I'd like to share some feedback on one particular thing I want to draw to your attention, right? Like that's your intro. And so you are, it's okay to reaffirm the relationship, but I'm not gonna be like, well, last week you did 2 good things and 1 bad thing. And so like that we're saying that's no bueno, right? That's
no bueno, no scorekeeping like that. You really ought to be coming to these conversations really kind and candid. This is not an either or situation. The kindest thing that you can do for me if you care about me is provide me direct, actionable feedback in a way that I can consume it and action it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's another pattern. So that was thank you for helping us to push that a little bit further behind us. I still see it out there, but maybe you and I can make a little dent in that world. The other one is this notion, and I literally had a leader say to me once, Debra, Lee, you praise people too often and too much. They're not going to take you seriously. And I was like, dude, you can put that on my tombstone. He was too positive and he praised too much. Like if that's what I go down for is my Achilles heel, then I'll take it. Right. And I walk. Now he did have a point. If it's always, just you're amazing, you're awesome, and there's never any other kind of counterbalances, then yeah, I get that point. But you're saying weekly, maybe twice a week. And some leaders out there going like, well, I haven't seen him do anything great. in the last quarter. They're just doing their job. That's the story, right? And so how do I find something to acknowledge on a weekly basis for folks who are quote unquote just doing their job? Help me beat the crap out of this crazy idea. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. One, I think we should acknowledge as leaders that we see a very small sliver of the way our team members show up. So if we don't have an open recognition culture to begin with, it may be hard for you to find that because you're not in the meetings where the actual work's getting done. You have very little exposure to the true impact and body of work that your team members are working on. And shame on us if that's the case. So if that's the case, the first thing you have to fix is to bring transparency to what's going on and encourage people in an open feedback and open recognition culture so that you have more to ground in. But I will also say you're probably not looking hard enough if you can't find something that you acknowledge people for that is meaningful. And I'm not suggesting that like some weeks it's harder. Some weeks I'm heads down, don't get to see my team for, the better part of the week. So I may not see it myself, but because we have an open recognition culture, I see what other people have seen and I add on to that. So if they're providing, and it's important that it's not just like an add a girl or add a boy, it needs to be specific and meaningful. And so, it needs to be descriptive. But if I see that as a leader, and that's shared through the eyes and words of the peers who are working with them, then I can step in and tie it to this is so critical to this particular initiative, or this is such a great demonstration of this particular value. So if I didn't see it firsthand, I can still acknowledge how they're showing up. Yes, exactly. And by the way, if that's what goes on my tombstone, I have lived a damn good life.
Amen. Well, and so thank you for that. And then one other one I want to try to maybe put a little dent in is this notion that, again, A, you're not looking hard enough, but B, the standard for recognition is not superlative performance, right? It's only when it is truly exceptional should there be. And so a distinction I was taught early on is there's a difference between recognition and rewards, right? I can recognize contribution. I can recognize effort. I can recognize behaviors that align with values. I can recognize reliability and consistency and steadiness. And it doesn't mean you're getting promoted, right? When I acknowledge it, I'm saying I acknowledge that happened. I'm saying that I saw that. That's all that means. And I think some people think that the only form of recognition is a reward. I'm like, no, that's a type of recognition. And yes, maybe that should be saved for superior performance or superior outcomes, but the idea that the only recognition comes when you get promoted or a raise, like we're missing this huge ocean of opportunity to recognize Debra, that was an incredible, I heard about that meeting you had with that group. That sounds so brutal. And you maintained your cool in there without losing it with them. Oh my gosh, way to show up in a compassionate way, even when our customers aren't. Like, I can recognize even a difficult situation where your behavior aligned with the values, even if the outcome was we lost the account or somebody, whatever, right? And that's all fair game to your once or twice a week. Like, so it's like they're there. You just have to redefine what's recognition and acknowledgement worthy.
You have to be intentional about it. And I think what's important about what you just shared is that you're actually seeing what it meant for that person to show up in that moment, in that context. And we're all very different in what we bring as our superpowers and what we're comfortable with and what is a challenge for us. So going a bit deeper and acknowledging, hey, that was a tough meeting, but you showed up with grace and care and you didn't lose your composure. Those are actually important acknowledgments for what it meant to me as a human showing up in that circumstance. And what we've lost in many workplaces is the human aspect, the human first approach to what we're doing. And it makes such a difference. And when you see me in that way, I'm more willing to challenge myself and push through those uncomfortable moments where it's maybe not my favorite thing to do, but because I know that somebody's paying attention, it goes a long way. And I'll give you two other facts. When it comes to recognition done right in cultures where recognition is at the forefront, it's very intentional, it's very public. What we have found through our own data across millions of pieces of recognition is that 11 million recognition posts included reference to specific company values over the course of the last 5 years. In the last year, the rewards that people could have redeemed for themselves were used in two interesting ways. One, $500,000 was given to charity instead of people redeeming for their own use. Two, people took what they could have redeemed for themselves and put those points back into giving recognition to others, because it's not about the points or the rewards. It's about the impact on their peers and wanting to be able to acknowledge that in a meaningful way. And so these are indicators of the impact that you can have on that virtuous cycle of building a thriving culture that is high performing, but also not me oriented. It's us oriented. We're in it together. And I want to celebrate my team members, and I want to have an impact here and be connected to it.
Well, there's that service orientation coming out loud and clear. You picked up from your mom and dad. And apparently it's shared by a few other million people. So you're not that odd. That's beautiful. Well, let me ask another scenario that I know leaders run into, and maybe they run into it themselves or others, but you keep mentioning the value of the public side of the recognition, right? And I get you on the upside, right? Other people get to see it. It's emulated, right? And there are people out there whose, workplace love language, right, is not public recognition. And I've had people straight up tell me, you ever acknowledge me in a group like that again, man, I will quit. Because that is so just, whether it's their culture, their personal values, whatever, it's like, it's really, really hard for them to receive that. So for those types of folks, and I don't think it's 1 in 100. I mean, it's a good percentage of the population where that's a normal situation. What advice would you have about navigating that situation for the person and for others around when you strive to accommodate that?
Yeah, certainly. You need to be able to respect people's preferences, and you need to be able to do it in a way that that resonates for them, right? So if people indicate they don't want to have an acceptance speech, or they don't want to have to stand up in front of a group, or they don't want the spotlight on them in the Zoom meeting, you need to respect that and find a way to deliver the recognition that is meaningful to the individual, but also shares with the organization the impact of certain individuals. And you can do that asynchronously. So that is helpful.
Could we make a real tangible example of that? Right. So I just want to translate what you're saying there. So, for example, this is what I'm hearing you say. So please coach and edit me here, Debra. Permit me, correct me on the podcast. Rather than saying Debra was such a key player in this pivotal project that is going to result in the transformation of our business, and she was so smart, and she was clever, and she was resourceful, and she was like, in that case, right? We're piling on and focusing on her. Right. Now, some people are going to love that, and they're going, yeah, that was me. Right. But for the person that doesn't jive with that, we might say this project was really pivotal and went through a really crazy moment. And there were some very important contributions from some key people that helped make that happen, which included being resourceful and clever and whatnot. And I want to, Debra, you're one of them, but I want to thank, a couple of, so you're reducing the magnitude of that spotlight on the person, but you're still pointing out the behaviors and the impacts. It's just less on them. And then they're like, okay, I can handle that much, right? That's what I'm hearing you say, is it's just in the delivery to where you focus on them.
It's subtlety, but there are also ways that you can do it that don't require that it be in front of a group. It can be recorded and memorialized in a post. We've recorded video recognition. As a Gen Xer, that's not my jam, but my millennials and Gen Z love it. So we record, different messages from different people. That person can save that and they can come back to it, but they can view it in the privacy of, like, they can turn red by themselves. They don't have to go and.
Okay. So that's the asynchronous part you were saying, right? Versus doing it live, which is synchronous, with subtlety, doing it asynchronously, so they still got it, and then you could tell other people of it, but they're not in the room and not feeling awkward. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. I want to translate that to leaders who are out there like, well, how do I do that? Well, speaking of the how do I's, could we do one other scenario? All right. Let me tee this up for you. So, let's take a supervisor employee relationship, because that's kind of our target audience here. I get it. It could be peer to peer as well. But okay, you caught them doing something right. It wasn't superlative. It wasn't astounding. It didn't save, the day, but it was good. It aligned with the behaviors and the targets that we want for an exceptional customer experience. Could you give us a little bit of a syntax of you've said specific, you've to tie it back to values and impact. Could you give us a little bit of a syntax about how we might do that without a fancy tool? And then maybe we can bridge into you telling us how your tools can make it even better.
So without a fancy tool, what I would think about is articulating the specifics of how they showed up, what they did, what they impacted, but also the unique qualities that they brought to that. And as a leader, we should know our strengths and the growth areas for our teams, but we should also know preferences, like what they enjoy versus what they don't. So sometimes the feedback or the recognition is focused on pushing through in an area that you're less comfortable. It may not be exceptional for somebody else, but they chose to step up instead of approaching it in a way that was more comfortable for them. And I've used helpful tips from like AI and describing the language. We have that in Bonusly, but when you need some inspiration for how to convey it impactfully, like some days I'm super articulate, other days I can't string four words together and have them be meaningful. Hopefully that's not today. So sometimes you can use tools to help you with that, but be intentional about it. Take a few minutes to just really thoughtfully approach how you provide that recognition, because what you hone in on and positively reinforce, you will see again. So this is your opportunity as a leader to reinforce things that you want to see again. And then the benefit of that is when you do it publicly, other people see that. And so, one of the big areas that people struggle with today is understanding expectations at work. Like, it's one of the top areas that has dropped off in the Gallup research.
I have no idea. And I can answer that question. So this is for any leader out there. It's very simple. For any employee, these are the same three expectations. I don't care. All I need you to do is read my mind, predict the future, and bend time and space. That's it. That's all I'm asking for, right? You do the things, we're good. I don't know where I'm unclear. I really don't understand. Goodness.
So this is, it's a good investment in your team, and it addresses several needs, not just the need of the individual that you're providing the recognition to.
Well, I like those components. So just to summarize those again, I heard, describe the specifics of the situation in that meeting, in that situation, on that project, on that task, so you're anchoring it to that moment, and then describe what was unique, maybe what was special, was it, it's like, that was something where I know that's not your favorite, and yet you stepped up. Or, hey, that's an area where one of your natural strengths really got a chance to shine. So that's that uniqueness you're talking about. And then maybe closing it up with, here's how it had an impact on that teammate or that customer or the bottom line or reputation or whatever the thing is that you're looking. So that's kind of the components, at least, that I heard you describe.
Exactly. And this is like 2 to 3 sentences, not 2 to 3 paragraphs. So don't overthink it either.
Yeah. And you also said be intentional about like, okay, think about whatever you're highlighting. Do you want to see more of that? Um, and I know I did this early on is at, at times I would recognize heroic efforts and, people just getting after it and making great sacrifices. And so then we're saying like, hey, that was a huge sacrifice. That was, man, and then people are like, oh, do heroic things make sacrifices?
That's what's expected.
And
Yes.
then you're like, wait, why is everybody, pulling, it's like, no. So be careful, like you said, because maybe what you're highlighting, isn't what you want to see again. So try to highlight the parts you do want to see again.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Well, tell us then a little bit about, okay, we've got the analog version of this more or less down. Like I'm a foreman with my, 8 trades craft people that I'm working with, or, I'm running my, heaven forbid, financial services sector in a large privately or publicly traded company. And I'm carving out my little culture, doing some of these things. How does the emergence of technology and software augment and enhance how leaders can do this so that it does become more of a corporate wide peer-to-peer and company employee type experience?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just makes it easier and more accessible. It takes the pressure off of manual processes. So with Bonusly, for example, we believe in meeting people where they are. So, chat integrations. People spend, if you're a Slack organization, you spend all day, every day in Slack. It's all there. So you have to meet them there. Nobody wants to go to a separate platform to try to do something or to stay informed as to what's going on. And it also just makes it like you have a constant reminder of the great things that are happening and who's working on what in doing it that way. So with Bonusly, we believe in ongoing frequent recognition. And so one of the ways that we have met people where they're at is with prompts to remind them that keep them actively focused on identifying and recognizing great work as it happens. So for managers in particular, we have specific features that help you remember, have I recognized this person within the last month? Have I provided feedback within the last month? I have my manager tools that help me walk into a one-on-one with a team member and see like what they were recognized for this last week. And it can start a really meaningful conversation around the work that they're doing. It also helps you surface if they're working on projects that maybe aren't what we need to lean into. We've got limited time and capacity these days. So it helps to inform what's going on so that you can coach and guide in the best possible way. For team members, they can look back on their recognition over time as they're preparing for self-evaluations or if they want to have a growth conversation with their manager. Ideally, the manager's initiating growth conversations as well. But, when you provide visibility and transparency, it empowers everyone to participate in those growth conversations.
So it's both the location of where the feedback can be provided, celebrated, synchronous, asynchronous, public or not. It's also a prompt to remind you to. It's also a little bit of a, hey, you've been shedding a lot of love on Debra, but what about David? So wait a second. Yeah, I've got, got such an affinity for Debra. So of course we click. So it's easier for me to do that. And with David, I got to work a little harder, but you know what? He needs his, prompts too. And then, like you said, then the employees also, and it's not just directly from one person, and it's not trying to assemble it from 10 different emails and a voicemail and a post-it note or thing. It's like, it allows them to kind of see like collectively, hey, these are the things that are being recognized. And that informs maybe where I want to invest more, in my growth.
Exactly. And as it relates to the concept of points, we believe in providing a monthly allocation of points that are givable. And you can use these directly in giving recognition, or you can add on to other posts. You can also add on to other posts without points. So it's not about the points, but the points help remind people that it needs to be frequent. It's just magical how our minds work as humans. But what that does is it then, prompts people to stay on track with identifying the great work that people are doing and providing recognition, we also surface trending topics like when somebody that you normally engage with is recognized for something, we'll remind you or prompt you, draw your attention to it in case you want to add on to that. So just making it easy. Life is busy enough and work is busy enough. If you make it easy for people to show up and acknowledge each other and catch each other at their best and participate in that process, it really just reinforces and streamlines the approach.
No, that's really great. Again, there's a lot you can do on your own, but, leverage some of these other tools and technologies, especially when you have a larger organization, you may be more distributed workforce. These are ways of supplementing and supporting those human interactions. Well, thank you for that sneak peek into it. So with that, Debra, for those who want to find out more about Bonusly, or for those who want to stay connected with your leadership journey, what are some ways that folks can reach out and connect with you?
Definitely reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn, Debra Squyres, and hopefully in the podcast notes we can share my LinkedIn.
Happy to do that. Yes.
Yeah. That's perfect. Reach out to me there. I love to connect and just talk with people about what they're doing in their workplaces. I truly am. This is a mission for me. It's not just about what we do at Bonusly. I feel like this is what I was put on earth for. So let's connect there. I'm often at the HR and leadership conferences, so would love to meet up in person. Check out bonusly.com. You can sign up for our newsletter so that you stay informed with the latest research, the latest happenings, and best and next practices to help you make work better in your workplace. So those are a few ways that you can connect with us.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking some of your time to share with our listeners some really practical tips on how you can contribute towards a culture of recognition and acknowledgement and creating that exceptional team member experience so that they in turn can create those exceptional customer experiences. I totally agree with you. It's not an either or. It's really more of an interdependent relationship that benefits each other. So really appreciate the tips you've shared with us today.
Thank you so much, Lee. I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment that could be the key to your next breakthrough. Let's stay connected and contribute together by grabbing that @Unleashing Leaders handle on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite network. This is Lee Scott. Keep learning, loving, and leading. Our future and our communities are counting on us.